We often seek to change or reject ourselves, believing that this will bring us peace. People try to accept themselves to become different, and they attempt to renounce themselves to gain more self-respect in their own eyes, or to achieve some spiritual experience, some exaltation of consciousness. There is a vital contradiction in the very notion of self-renunciation as well as in self-acceptance. The renunciation of what we call the self is not an act of will. It is not something we can force. The egoism of the self grows with the notion that it can command itself, that it is the master and ruler of its own processes, motivations, and desires. Then, it becomes evident that the part of us that wants to change us is precisely the part that needs to be changed. Yet we discover that our attempts at rejection or acceptance are fruitless, as they fail to reach that inaccessible core of our inner self that is trying to accept or reject. At this moment, the ego dies upon realizing its own inability, its ineptitude to make any truly significant difference to itself. The only significant outcome of any serious attempt at self-renunciation or self-acceptance is the humbling discovery that it is impossible. And it is precisely this discovery that brings the death of the ego and opens the path to rebirth. At the heart of detachment lies the understanding that it is impossible to truly live while clinging to the illusion of control. An individual does not begin to be truly alive until they have lost themselves, until they stop anxiously clinging to their life, possessions, and reputation. In this realm, the truth about finding life by losing it is not a precept, but the reality of something that happens. It is important to note that those who have truly experienced this self-death do not claim any merit on their part in the process. They understand that if they did anything, it was something so simple that anyone could have done it, as all they did was recognize a universal fact of life, something as true for the weak and foolish as it is for the wise and strong. Often, spiritual practices that emphasize suffering, discipline, and endurance as essential requirements to enter the kingdom of heaven end up becoming traps of pride, reinforcing the ego instead of transcending it. Sermons that appeal to guilt or fear merely feed egocentrism, pretending that a life of constant self-frustration was, in fact, a great spiritual achievement. This type of discourse turns into a presumptuous and unpleasant form of preaching that has no creative effect, as the only motivations for action it presents are shame, fear, or guilt. And when we respond to these motivations, we find only a balm for the wounded pride of the ego, a balm on which our egocentrism flourishes with particular enthusiasm. With such misunderstanding set aside, perhaps we can delve deeper into what it means to find life by losing it. The main point is that the state metaphorically called self-death or self-renunciation is not a future condition to be attained. It is instead a present fact. Consequently, we often evoke truly disturbing emotions that we would like to control. Our resistance to these emotions is as natural as the emotions themselves. In reality, they are the same thing, as emotions appear only as a manifestation of a state of tension and resistance. After all, if I felt no aversion to fear, it would no longer be fear. Many psychologists point out that the error lies in not responding genuinely to our feelings or in trying to feel differently from how we actually feel. The true importance of what these psychologists attempt to explain is that there is astonishing wisdom in the natural and spontaneous reactions of our organism in the course of events. That is the extraordinary ability to feel an event inwardly instead of bursting into a hasty action to avoid the tension of that feeling. This ability is, in fact, a marvelous power of adaptation to life, much like the instant response of water flowing around the obstacles in its path. The reason I speak of inward feeling rather than outward action is that I am considering the human situation in the face of events over which nothing can be done. Events for which our only response is feelings. I am thinking of the definite certainty of death, the complete helplessness of the human being amid the vast current of life. And finally, the special type of feelings that arise when we are confronted with a conflict of emotions that cannot be resolved. All these situations generate feelings that, in the long term, are as irresistible as the situations themselves are insoluble. These are the so-called ultimate feelings. And much of what we call philosophy is merely the futile attempt to convince humanity to free itself from them. When we resist our feelings or try to control them, we interrupt this natural process. However, by yielding to the reality of inevitable feelings, we experience an extraordinary liberation. Therefore, what I have called the death of the ego occurs at the moment one discovers and admits that these ultimate feelings are irresistible. The point is that these ultimate feelings are as wise as the others, and their wisdom arises when we stop resisting them, realizing we are simply incapable of doing so. When, for instance, life finally compels us to yield, to surrender to what is commonly called the terror of the unknown, the repressed feeling suddenly bursts forth like a spring of pure joy, a sense of freedom beyond the bonds of the ego. What was once experienced as horror at our inevitable mortality is transformed through an internal alchemy into an almost ecstatic sense of liberation from the chains of individuality. But we usually fail to discover the wisdom of our feelings because we do not allow them to complete their work. We try to repress them or dispatch them into premature action. These feelings, in fact, possess an innate wisdom, functioning as part of an internal creative process, much like childbirth. They begin with pain, but culminate in something new and transformative, a child. This is the central paradox. It is precisely when I discover that I cannot surrender myself that I am surrendered. Precisely when I think I cannot accept myself that I am accepted. It is at the point of absolute incapacity that we achieve full sincerity. It is upon reaching this hard rock of impossibility that we attain sincerity. in which we can no longer endure the masquerade of hide and seek between the good self trying to change the bad self, revealing that both are, after all, the same individual. The sage Chuang-tzu expresses this idea poetically. Just as the short legs of a duck cannot be stretched without causing pain, our natural characteristics must be accepted as they are. This full acceptance of reality is what frees us, allowing us to truly live.